Before we introduce the mayor, I wanted to do this. I know that we have some Purple Heart recipients in our audience today. If you are one of those who's earned the Purple Heart, would you please stand and let us give you our appreciation? It's a great privilege now to recognize our mayor. Jeff Williams was elected mayor back in May of this year after decades of public service in Arlington. He's president of Arlington-based Graham Associates, an award-winning engineering and planning firm. In 2009, he was presented with the State of Texas Outstanding Civil Engineering Achievement Award. He's a graduate of Texas Tech University with a degree in civil engineering, and he was inducted into the university's Civil Engineering Academy for Engineering Excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our mayor, Jeff Williams.
Is this not a beautiful setting to have a Veterans Day ceremony? And it also is very symbolic of the cooperation between the South Vietnamese and the Americans that took place in the Vietnam War. Now that same cooperation, now as we have our Asian American citizens working together here, have created an incredible statue and memorial here to the Vietnam War. And I'm very grateful for the work that took place on that. And of course, we have Peter Dow, we have Dr. Dane, of course, our city council representing the Arlington Tomorrow Foundation, many others who had a hand in that. And then, of course, Cleet, congratulations to the Veterans Park Foundation for what all happened here and all the work that went into this, because now we have a place to come and remember that is very meaningful, and a place to have this type of ceremony. And it's great to see that sunshine, isn't it, here on a Veterans Day. But on behalf of all the residents of Arlington, I wish to thank all of the veterans here today, and then also all of the local veterans who were not able to make it. We also want to thank our local sons and daughters who are presently serving in the military. I look forward to this opportunity here today to visit with you and acknowledge our veterans for the service and dedication that they have given to this great country. Now, most veterans count their time in service among the most defining experience of their lives. And I know that my grandfather, my father-in-law, the stories there of sacrifice, but yet the reward of knowing that they were fighting for freedom made such a difference. You know, for many, military service drew out the best in them, instilling high standards of diligence, discipline, and loyalty. They lived by a code and stood ready to fight and die for our country. And we've come to appreciate more than ever the veterans of Korea and Vietnam who endured the worst that war can bring. Massive casualties, merciless enemies, and in terrible conditions, and for some, long captivity. And also for some veterans, the nation's gratitude was slow in coming, as Congressman Barton said. But today, I believe all veterans know that their sacrifices are appreciated. It is a new day, and we appreciate what is being done, or what has been done in these wars, and we want to continue to honor the courage that was exemplified in both the Korean and Vietnam wars. We also want to extend our sincerest gratitude and thanks for your sacrifice and selflessness as you made and continue to make our country a better place. And on this day, your presence here at the ceremony is a very vivid reminder of how courage and leadership leads to service. Your lives, your courage, your leadership, your service to our national security, as well as the sacrifice of your fallen comrades, are what we honor today. And one of the real privileges here that I have is to get to read the proclamation on this Veterans Day. Whereas Veterans Day has its origins on November 11th, 1918, armistice which brought World War I to a conclusion. And whereas the Allied victory of World War I affirmed the strength of great nations acting together for high purposes. And whereas the people of the United States caused through their elected representatives the designating of November 11th as a federal legal holiday, which in 1954 became officially known thereafter as Veterans Day. And whereas Veterans Day continues to be celebrated and commemorated with solemn observances in honor of all Americans who have served their country in times of war and conflict, and whereas Veterans Day has become a significant part of our American heritage as we recognize the millions of our citizens whose military service has had a profound effect on history, and whereas the courage, honor, sacrifice, and dedication which veterans of the United States Armed Forces have displayed in the cause of justice, freedom, and democracy are most worthy of recognition. Now therefore, I, Jeff Williams, Mayor of the City of Arlington, Texas, and on behalf of the Arlington City Council, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2015 as Veterans Day, and ask that this day be observed with appropriate ceremonies in honor of those who have served to preserve our principles of justice, freedom, and democracy. Cleet, I want to present this proclamation to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. You know, this beautiful monument behind me was prepared by our sculptor, Mark Bird, and he's going to address us now. I just want to say, if you'll notice, the medal is on his chest. You'll know why he's here.
Well, thank you. I stand here, a Marine combat veteran with a few decorations, of which I'm proud. But I stand here in great humility and awe. There are men here with us today who fought not one tour, not two tours, but a continuous tour of duty for 10 years or more in that war. And after the war, many of them served 5, 10, 15 years in re-education camps that were euphemistically called, well, they were really prisons. And so it's with great humility and pride that I have been honored to create this sculpture. And as the sculpture was commissioned by the Vietnamese American community as their thank you to the United States of America, to us, for fighting for their freedom. And I thank them for fighting for our freedom, for the freedom of free men all over the world. I have a thank you gift here that I've brought for the directors of the Heroes of South Vietnam Foundation, which funded this memorial. And believe me, that was no small task, the work that they had to do over about 5 years to make this happen. Could you guys come up here? Dr. Hung Dang, Duc Mai, Peter Dow, and Tom Bui. Tom Bui is one of those men. He was a Vietnamese paratrooper. He fought in places where we never went as United States Marines. This is a Republic of Vietnam flag, which was given to me when we started this project, I believe by Duke. I return the flag. This book tells the Vietnamese story, and it tells the story of what happened to, say, Le Bay Bien, the courageous Vietnamese Marine major who led the fight at Dong Ha Bridge and held off that Russian-style tank army. And believe me, the Russians had advisors there too. We were fighting Russia and China in Vietnam. So without further ado, present one of these books to each of you as a gift conveyed by me, but from Richard Botkin, the author of this book.
It's my honor to introduce Robert T. Hastings, Jr., Senior Vice President, Communications and Government Affairs at Bell Helicopter and Chief of Staff there. Mr. Hastings joined Bell Helicopter from Northrop Grumman, where he served as Vice President of Communication. He served in the Bush administration as Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. Before joining the Defense Department, he served as Chief of Staff and Vice President of Communications for BAE Systems Incorporated. Hastings is a retired U.S. Army officer, colonel, with more than 20 years of experience as a master Army aviator. He likes to stay in planes rather than jump out of them, and public affairs officer. He continues to serve as a colonel, chief of staff with the Texas Military Forces. In 2009, he was awarded the Department of Defense Distinguished Public Service Medal. He was honored by the University of Maryland, his alma mater, college, with the 2010 Distinguished Alumni, and by the Public Relations Society of America with the 2010 Lloyd B. Dennis Distinguished Leadership Award. He's a licensed commercial pilot and has completed executive studies at the Wharton Business School and the University of Michigan. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Hastings.
So thank you. Obviously, he got a hold of the version of the bio my mother wrote. So first of all, Congressman Barton, Mr. Mayor, City Council, all the distinguished guests that are here, veterans, I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for the invitation. I have to start, first of all, by saying happy birthday to my Marine brothers and sisters that are in the room. They're celebrating yesterday 240 years. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't remind you that the United States Army celebrated its 240th birthday about 5 months ago. So I'm deeply honored to join you here today. Veterans Day is it's a very important day for Americans. It's important to me as well. Like all of you here, I'm an American. I know that the blessings of liberty that my family and I enjoy have been earned by veterans. Veterans who served before me, veterans who served with me, veterans who continue to serve today. And I'm doubly pleased to be here today as we give a special salute to Vietnam veterans. I grew up in the home of a Vietnam veteran. My father served in Vietnam, and I saw and witnessed and believe that the appropriate gratitude from his nation at that time when he returned home was never expressed. He served for many years in the VFW, and I know he enjoyed the comfort and camaraderie of his fellow Vietnam veterans. Unfortunately today, he's suffering from the effects of Agent Orange, and it's slowly taking away his quality of life. He remains a proud soldier, and I'm proud of him. So I'd like to once again ask for a round of applause for all the Vietnam veterans that are here. So we set Veterans Day aside each year to celebrate, really to remember, to honor the men and women who served our nation in time of peace and in time of war. Today we pay tribute to every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, and Merchant Marine who voluntarily served to protect our nation, our values, and our way of life. We remember those that came home and those that did not. Those that fired their weapons in anger, those that vigilantly stood on the wall during Cold Wars, those that have fallen, those that are wounded, those that remain unaccounted for. And we have to remember the sacrifices of their families as well. As we stand here in the serene setting in the wonderful state of Texas in this fabulous Arlington Veterans Memorial, it's almost easy to forget that today we remain a nation at war. We slept safely in our homes last night. We had breakfast with our families this morning. Some of us drove our children to school. This upcoming weekend, we'll enjoy sports, we'll mow our lawns, we'll go to the mall, maybe play a round of golf. It is almost easy to forget we're a nation at war. But those of us that are gathered here today know better, right? We remember, we know, we remember. Today there are more than 150,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are stationed outside the United States. They're in 150 countries around the world. There are 70,000 that are on deployments in contingency operations around the world that are in harm's way. There are 9,800 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines still in Afghanistan, and we're back up to 3,500 troops in Iraq. And just last month, a Special Forces soldier gave his life in Syria. And I read that that soldier was on his 14th combat deployment. 14 combat deployments. Since current combat operations began in October 2001, there have been more than 7,000 American servicemen and women who've given their lives in combat, and more than 52,000 have come home with wounds. Here in Texas, we have 3 major Army posts, 6 Air Force bases, the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station, we've got the Texas Air and Army National Guard, and the Joint Reserve Base, Fort Worth, right in our own backyard. Texas is home to more military personnel than any other state in the Union. I find it interesting this summer we read in the news about the secret invasion of Texas by the United States Army, and I wonder about all those folks that forgot about Fort Bliss and Fort Hood. We Texans know how well the sacrifices of our troops and their families. So Texas has always been a land of patriots. We've always responded when our nation called, and Texans are well represented in the roles of decorated heroes. Let me introduce you to a few. Army Specialist Monica Brown, Lake Jackson, Texas, earned the Silver Star for saving the lives of fellow soldiers after a roadside bomb tore through a convoy of Humvees in eastern Afghanistan. After the explosion, which wounded 5 soldiers in her unit, Specialist Brown ran through insurgent gunfire and used her body to shield wounded comrades as mortar rounds fell just yards away and administered life-saving first aid. I think I read she was 19 when she did that. Army Specialist Michael Carter, a native Texan, Silver Star recipient, was drawn into ferocious mountainside battle while assigned as a combat cameraman covering Special Forces operations in Afghanistan. Carter ditched his camera, charged forward, laying down suppressive fire to recover a wounded soldier, providing first aid while continuing to engage the enemy. When the enemy closed within 40 feet, Carter stood his ground and laid suppressive fire to block their advance. With danger-close airstrikes exploding less than 100 yards away, Carter used his body to shield casualties from falling debris and assisted in a daring rescue down a vertical 60-foot cliff. I know Specialist Carter. He was about 21 when he did that. Marine Captain Joshua Glover, right here of Dallas, earned the Silver Star for twice in one day leading his platoon deep into enemy territory during the infamous Battle of Fallujah. Captain Glover repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire as he engaged targets at point-blank range while directing his platoon in close combat with the enemy. And to go back to our theme today of Vietnam, by my count, there were 29 sons of Texas who earned the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. Texas is, has been, will always be the embodiment of the land of the free and the home of the brave. A few years ago, the term the greatest generation was coined in remembrance of the millions of Americans who served in World War II. And I'm sure we have World War II veterans here with us today, along with veterans from not only Vietnam, but Korea, Grenada, Panama, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, the list could go on. From the liberation of Europe and the Pacific, to the defeat of communism, to the fight against extremism today, America owes a debt to many great generations. So in my previous role, working with the Bush administration and even today as a defense contractor, I have the honored privilege of knowing many who currently serve in the armed forces. I'm pleased to tell you that today's armed forces is today's greatest generation. And despite repeated deployments into harsh and dangerous environments, they are up to the challenge. They're the best trained military our nation has ever fielded, and they continue to serve voluntarily to re-enlist in record numbers in what has become our nation's longest period of war. They ask only one thing, our gratitude, but we owe them so much more. More than 200 years ago, our first president, George Washington, said the willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars are treated and appreciated by their nation. Today's returning veterans and their families face many challenges, maybe not so different from previous conflicts, but it does seem as though sometimes we as a society struggle to provide them the care and support they deserve. We owe our veterans the very best in health care, not just for their battlefield wounds, but for their lifelong needs, both physical and emotional. We owe our veterans education and training to ensure good jobs so that they can support themselves and their families with the dignity they earned on the battlefield. We owe them opportunities to continue to contribute as valued members of our society regardless of their ailments. And we owe them our respect, which is again what today is all about. So I have a handwritten sign that hangs in my office. It was written by a wounded Navy SEAL and taped on the door of his hospital room at the Naval Medical Center in Bethesda. This SEAL had been shot a number of times. He had a tracheal tube in place for 7 months. He eventually underwent 26 surgeries. When he first arrived at Walter Reed, Bethesda, he couldn't speak because of the trach. and he had limited mobility due to his wounds, but he managed to write a message. I'm going to read it to you. It reads, "If you are coming into this room with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere. The wounds I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. I am incredibly tough and will make a full recovery." What is full? That is the utmost, absolute, physically, my body has the ability to recover. Then I will push about 20% farther through sheer mental tenacity. The room you are about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense, rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. So I don't know where that SEAL is today. I lost track, but I do know that he did return from Walter Reed to active duty, and the last I heard, he was working to get qualified to return to a SEAL team. So in closing, let me repeat a quote that you've all heard many times. I hope it doesn't bore you, but I'm sure it's being read at ceremonies like this all across our nation today. It has been said that the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the agitator, who has given us freedom to protest. It is the soldier who salutes the flag, serves beneath the flag, whose coffin is draped by the flag, who gives the protesters the freedom to abuse and burn the flag. So thank you for inviting me to join you at the celebration today. God bless you all for attending. God bless our veterans. God bless the young men and women who serve our country and go in harm's way every day. And God bless the United States of America. Cool.
Thank you, Colonel Hastings. And now we're going to ask Congressman Barton and Colonel Hastings to help us to give a small token of our appreciation to all the Vietnam veterans who happen to be here today. Robert James Armstrong III, United States Air Force Sergeant.
Trung úy Đặng Thành Tuấn.
And now we have a special recognition. There are 25 names on the Vietnam Wall who are Arlington boys. They all enlisted while making this their home. There's one that I'll mention last, and his home of record was New Mexico, but he graduated from the Arlington High School class of 1963. So I'm going to call out each name and we'll remember each one. Specialist 4th Class Jesse Arredondo. Petty Officer 3rd Class Ernest Jack Buckaloo. Staff Sergeant Charles Dorian Bullard. Private 1st Class Kenneth James Cantwell. Staff Sergeant Eugene Lunsford Clay. Lieutenant Commander Marshall Barb Collins. Second Lieutenant Dennis Boyd Easley. Master Sergeant Alan Thomas Elder Jr. Corporal Gary Gene Gordon. Private 1st Class Dale Edward Greenwood. Private 1st Class John Darcote Heflin. Major Richard Hunt. Private 1st Class Chester Gale Jordan. Corporal Scotty Lee Keys.
Specialist 4th Class Richard Allen Lasher.
Sergeant Pat Weldon McGee. Lieutenant Robert Perry Mills Jr. Lance Corporal Aubrey Earl Morgan Jr. First Lieutenant Franklin King Nelson. Petty Officer 2nd Class Michael Edward Schafernacher. Corporal Earl Carl Tidwell Jr. Private 1st Class Johnny Charles Turner. First Lieutenant Robert Tinsley Wood. And the last one, Joe Mack Kemp, United States Marine Corps, Corporal.